This is a Soviet-produced compact disc player. And it's not some experimental prototype, it's not some small batch production for Supreme Party leaders. It's a normal consumer device normal people like you and me could buy, provided we had the money. In 1990, this device was worth 1,895 rubles. For reference, the average salary was a little bit shy of 400 rubles, so 5 months of working just to buy this one. In April 1991, the Soviet ruble became freely and legally exchangeable with the United States dollar, and we finally got the understanding of what Soviet economy was really worth of. The retail price of this device was set at 2,131 ruble, or 80 United States dollars, twice as cheaper as a similar class device in the United States of America. And it's a pretty decent device. Let's check out how it works. First, we push the on button, and the nice blue vacuum fluorescent display turns on. Then we'll press the eject button, and the compact disc tray will open. Then we take the compact disc and put it in the tray, shiny side down. There is a nice spring-loaded bed here. And then we close the tray using the same button. The compact disc is being read, and the vacuum fluorescent display displays the total duration of the disc and the number of tracks. Then we press the play button and start listening to the music. The controls here are pretty straightforward. You have your play-pause button. The icons might not look familiar to you, but they are actually part of the same international ISO 7000 standard and stay right alongside the familiar triangle and vertical bars. Then you have the stop button. The word stop is written in Cyrillics. Then we have the eject button and the repeat button. When I press the repeat button, an indicator lights up, and it indicates that when the last track is over, it will not stop, and it will instead start playing track 1 again. Let's turn it off for now. On the right side, you have your previous track button, the next track button. I'll explain these two buttons later. And then we also have the rewind and fast forward button. Notice that for the first 5 seconds it was fast forwarding slowly, and then it became fast forwarding much faster. You also have a display button. Normally the display displays the number of the current track and the elapsed time of the current track, but when I press the display button, it starts displaying the remaining time of the disc. And when I press the display button again, it displays the elapsed time of the disc. And on the third press, it goes back to displaying the number of the current track and the elapsed time of the current track. There is also a headphone jack that allows you to connect your normal 3.5-inch jack headphones. But the left and right headphones volume needs to be adjusted separately, and it's not very convenient. I don't know why did they do that. They probably just didn't have a decent double potentiometer of such a small size. Поехали. Ух ты, блядь. This wonderful device broke right in the middle of making this video. So now I'll have to open it, and on the occasion, let's see what's inside. Like many Soviet audio equipment, it uses a plain screwdriver. Inside, this device looks like Berlin in 1989. You can clearly see the eastern part and the western part, except that in this case, the western part is occupied by Soviets. For example, you can see the Soviet power switch, or the Soviet power transformer, or the Soviet power supply board, with red Soviet capacitors and Soviet connectors. In the eastern part, you can see Japanese-produced Sanyo CD transport. That's why I showed the advertisement for the Sanyo CD player earlier. It was probably using the same 3-beam laser CD transport, which is capable of reading CDR discs. In fact, the music that we were previously listening to was on CDR. More of that music later. Then on the eastern part, we also see the Japanese-produced mainboard, employing Sanyo LC7881 digital-to-analog converter. And again, on the western side, we see Soviet connectors with Soviet labels. The display is also Soviet-produced. Then on the bottom, we see a headphone amplifier board. As you can guess, looking at its quality, it's Soviet-produced. And on the right, we see a logic control board, which is also Soviet-produced and uses Soviet TTL logic microchips. In 1995 or so, this unit is from 1994, they finally developed and started producing their own mainboard, but they used the very same Japanese transports until the very last days of the production. The biggest problem with these devices were these small bottom boards that are hidden behind this plastic cover. They had no protection from the static charge whatsoever, and when you touch the button carrying any electric charge, which you did a lot because Siberian winter is minus 25 degrees outside, 25 degrees inside, because the heating is basically free, and so you get like 5% humidity air, which means you have static charge on practically everything. And when you push the button, you send that charge right to the main control board, with obvious and pretty deadly consequences for it. I already put some blue insulation tape here. This is basically a Soviet version of gray duct tape that is used to fix everything. This Soviet cable, which is really rigid for some reason, was loose inside the case, and it probably touched the laser head and prevented it from moving, and so it could not read any disk. Now let's assemble it back and see if it works now. And you might ask, what music was available on CD in the Soviet Union? Did they allow bringing in Western music? Did they build their own CD factory? And yes, they bought some equipment in Germany, they sent their men to study in Sweden, and in 1989 they built a compact disc production factory in Moscow. Producing compact discs in 1989 was not a small business. You had to have extremely clean air in your factory and make all your workers go through special cleaning facilities and wear special suits. The air had to be not only extremely clean, but also extremely dry, as the Japanese polycarbonate that they used for printing their discs was an extremely hygroscopic material, so the air humidity in the compact disc printing room had to be no higher than 0.02%. Sneaky Germans were more than happy to sell Soviets the old outdated equipment, as precisely in this era a new monoline CD production machines were developed that combined all the compact disc production stages inside one machine, so it didn't require a whole clean room where all the machines of the previous generation technologies were installed. The first compact disc that was produced in this factory contained religious songs written by Ivan the Terrible, a ruthless and cruel Tsar that ruled Russia in the second half of the 16th century. Here is how it looked like. There are national symbols, and the disc says that it's Russian, not Soviet. In the interview on the national news, the chief of the factory emphasized multiple times, This disk is indeed Russian. After more than 70 years of trying to destroy all the national feelings and create a new Soviet identity with all the power of Soviet propaganda, people still wanted to be with the ones of their kind, and they used every opportunity to do so. This factory is built in Moscow. This compact disc is Russian. No other Soviet republic has anything to do with it. The majority of the discs produced in this compact disc factory contained classical music. I have a couple of them here with me. Let's check them out. So, this is a Soviet compact disc. It is produced by the Melodiya factory. It is the same brand that produced all the vinyl records in the USSR. Here is its logo. Now let's open it. The backside of the cover is in English. That means these could probably be exported. Now let's take the booklet out. Inside the booklet you have some information on the pieces that are recorded on the disc. There is also some information in English. The font is precisely the same font that was used on all the vinyl record covers. It's one of the best Cyrillic fonts for printing up to these days. The disc itself says, unauthorized public performance, broadcasting, hiring, lending, and copying of this record prohibited. Funny to hear that from the factory that just a few years before was literally pirating Western music and not paying any of the licensing fees. On the backside of the disc there is nothing special, just a track list in both languages and some technical information. The pieces were recorded in 1974 and 1989, obviously recorded and mixed on analog equipment, and then the disc itself was printed in 1991. The price of the disc was 20 rubles, which was a pretty good money. It was like 6 or 7 times more expensive than a typical vinyl record, and with your average salary you could buy like 15 of these. Now let's check out another disc. Again, we have the cover in English. I think these probably were meant to be exported, because there was no way the planned Soviet economy could produce enough CD players to play all these discs.
Но и тут же встала проблема. Если в этом году дисков с различными программами будет выпущено 1 миллион, то проигрывателей, которые производятся в Таллине и Бердске, всего несколько тысяч.
And the Soviet classical music recordings were rare, were unique. They were renowned for their quality. Maybe it was just their small contribution to slightly improve the trade balance of the failing economy. Write me a comment if you ever heard or saw Soviet-produced CDs in the 1990s. Let's check out the booklet. Yeah, again, the information in English is obviously incomplete. And look, this was digitally recorded, digitally edited, and digitally mastered. Oh, and this was produced later in 1991. Because there is no printed price here, that means the state control prices are basically over at this point. Also, it's interesting that it says that it is recorded in 1981, but it says it was a digital recording. I didn't know that they had digital recording in the USSR in 1981. I only read that they bought the first DAT machines in 1987. I definitely need to investigate more. Now, let's listen to the music. Yes, it works. Another feature of the CD player is the ability to make programs. For example, I want to listen to only tracks 2 and 4. I select my first track, that'll be track 2, and then I press Program. And the red indicator lights up and indicates that we are now in programming mode. Then I select my next track, that'll be track 4. And again I press Program, and my track is stored in the program. I can add more tracks like this, but these Soviet classical music CDs don't have too many tracks on them. Every piece is pretty large. Now I can press play and start playing my program. It starts with a track 2. Now that the track 2 is over, it starts playing not track 3, but according to our program, track 4. Let's stop it for now. And now I can delete any track from the program by pressing reset button and eventually delete the program itself. And in today's day and age, this all looks pretty weird. I mean, who needs this pointless and difficult to use feature? But let's remember that it's only been a few years ago that we've got computers that can talk to us in our language, that can draw, that can program themselves and correct their own mistakes. But in 1999, such a CD player was almost the only option. A normal person could give commands to the machine and watch them being executed. I mean, it was mostly for fun. I remember I was playing with a similar feature on a Chinese mini hi-fi system my father brought home to replace our Soviet Comet 225. And I used it just for fun, for the joy of just being able to program something, but sometimes I also used it to make custom cassette mixtapes that contained only the songs that I liked. And after all, this 4 buttons and 3 digits display interface is not really such a bad user experience comparing with creating a custom playlist in Spotify using just your phone's small touchscreen. Playing your music on your PC using Winamp or a similar program was truly the best music playing experience that we had. And you would ask, didn't they have normal music on CD, like for normal people? And that's another interesting story. Here is Alexander Novikov. You probably didn't know him, neither you should. His music is for local consumption only. The musical component is pretty primitive. The important part are the lyrics.
Вези меня, извозчик, прогулкой мостовой.
Which would not be comprehended by a Westerner even when translated. And I myself barely understand half of what he's singing about. In 1983, he illegally recorded and sold reel-to-reel tapes with his album, titled Drive Me, Cabman. Shortly, he was jailed and sentenced to 10 years of prison camps in Siberia. The real Siberian prison camps with murderers and rapists. The expertise on his songs said that he was promoting violence, alcoholism, prostitution, and needs isolation from the society and psychiatrical help. After a few years of perestroika, in 1990 he was proved not guilty and set free. And in 1991, the Drive Me, Cabman album became one of the first popular music albums released on compact disc. It's curious because there was a number of authors of similar music who have fled USSR to the West in the 1980s and had access to all the Western technology and recording labels, but none of them were able to publish their music on compact disc. Publishing on compact disc at the time was really expensive. It was an achievement. The Melodiya compact disc factory didn't last long. The equipment had wear and tear, the production quality lowered. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, private businesses started building their own factories with more modern equipment and lower costs of production and higher quality. This is one of the privately produced discs from 1992, the first Russian rock album on compact disc. By 1994, people already became nostalgic for the USSR, and compact disc design reflected that nostalgia. The history of compact disc in Soviet Union and Russia is a perfect example how things can unexpectedly turn around. One day you're in prison camp, the next day you're on compact disc. One day they produce compact disc in Soviet Union and proudly claim them to be Russian, and in a few years they produce compact discs in Russia and decorate them as if they were Soviet. People always want what they don't have. And here is the user's manual for our compact disc player. It was produced by the factory called Vega. That's the only factory in the whole USSR that was dedicated exclusively to producing domestic audio equipment. All the other factories that produced domestic audio equipment were really double purpose and also produced military stuff. This factory is actually located near my hometown in Siberia, Novosibirsk. The model name is PKD 12022S, PKD being short for проигрыватель компакт дисков, meaning compact disc player, or CDP, a very common prefix for Western and Japanese-produced compact disc players. The manual itself looks like it was prepared on a typewriter. Here they say how to check the player when buying it at the store, what are the operating conditions, what should be included in the box. Then they explain the controls. We've all seen that. Here are technical characteristics. 90 decibels signal-to-noise ratio, 80 decibels of dynamic range. Characteristics that are unbelievably good to any person who never saw a digital audio equipment in their life before. Here they acknowledge that the device was built using the components of the Japanese CAC company. They also claim that you should use the special adapter when using 8 ohms headphones. Total bullshit. I used them without any adapter and they sounded just fine. Here they explain the controls. Here they explain how to install the disc. And look which cable is included. RCA to DIN5. All the Soviet audio components were connected with DIN5 connector, but since the output connectors are installed on the main board and the main board is Japanese produced, they had no other choice but to use the RCA connectors for this player. Again, more instructions, weird Soviet icons. They explain how the display works. By the way, this display should have indicators here that indicate whether you are seeing the elapsed time of the track, the elapsed time of the disc, or the remaining time of the disc. But since the Japanese mainboard did not provide the necessary signals, they had to keep these display sections disconnected. Here they explain the advantages of the compact disc, that you can just remove the dust and grease with a small cloth, and that the presence of the dust doesn't really affect the sound quality. Again, an insane thing for people who previously only used vinyl records players. Here they explain how to enter the program. Look, you can play the tracks in any order you want. Isn't it magic? And, of course, they explain the guarantee conditions. And the guarantee term for this player is 12 months from the date of selling. Here is a page that is filled when this player is sold. There are different fields for different stamps. Quality control stamp, here is a factory address, postal code, the town of Bertsk, the region of Novosibirsk, that's where I'm from, the date of the selling. Then you put some information here if it is repaired during the guarantee term, and that's like that. A curious document of the epoch. The Vega factory was running until approximately 1995, before it finally lost its competition to the cheaper Chinese boomboxes and mini hi-fi systems. And the final question of the day is, well, how do I get one? And it's actually pretty simple and straightforward. Look, there's a guy in Novosibirsk, that's where the factory was. He is actually an ex-worker at the factory. He worked there as an engineer. He had access to the warehouse, and what he basically does is he maintains the new old stock of all the equipment that was produced in this factory. He buys them, he sells them, he repairs them. He has a pretty cool business. Just look at all this retro beauty you can buy in nearly perfect condition. There are other guys in Novosibirsk that can make, for example, these replacement button boards that don't fry the main board with static electricity every time you push them. There is a whole living and vibrant Soviet audio community in Novosibirsk. And, well, I emailed this guy and I told him, hey, I want to buy a CD player. It was $160 or so. And then I texted another guy in Telegram and he gave me an address in Moscow. And the guy from Novosibirsk mailed the CD player to the guy in Moscow. And the guy in Moscow, well, he knows another guy that drives a van with Belarusian license plates. And Belarusian license plates, in the current situation, it was 2023 or so, the Belarusian license plates are the only ones that can enter both Russia and all the countries of the European Union that Russia shares the border with. And so that guy with Belarusian van, he took my CD player from Moscow to Vilnius to Lithuania. And then the Lithuanian guys on their van, they drive all the way from Lithuania to the south of Spain, to Marbella. And one random Saturday morning at 7 a.m. or so, this guy called me and told me, hey, in half an hour, be at the truck driver's parking lot in the northern outskirts of Barcelona. And I rushed there. I even had to take the toll road to be there in time. And then I met those Lithuanian guys on that truck driver's parking lot. And they gave me the box with my CD player. Pretty easy, right? And I'm super grateful that in 2026, despite all the wars, all the sanctions, all the closed borders, I can still turn on my 1994 CD player that was produced in my hometown, put on a CD by a local post-rock band from my hometown. I have 2 of them for some reason, and then enjoy some music from the summer of 2013, from the time when there was no war, the borders were much more open, and there was no streaming services that censor the songs or even remove the whole albums. And if you use them, you give them full permission to alter or even erase your memories. I'm certainly not doing that. Subscribe to this channel. Here we try to resist the passage of time by all the means possible. And we do that because I think we need to tell the future generations that some things were actually better in the past, and you should demand them, and you should fight for them. You should fight for bringing them back, because they are possible. It is possible to live better. And living in the present shouldn't mean that you can't have nice things from the past. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something interesting today. And see you in the next video. Bye.